On this episode of the Focus Capital podcast, I sit down and interview Nick Karadza. Nick is one of the founders of Rockstar Real Estate, which is a real estate brokerage based here in the GTA, focused on helping real estate investors get into the real estate market and grow their portfolio. Nick and I talk about a few different things. One, his background, getting into the business, current state of affairs here in Canada, and looking ahead for what's coming up in the future. And if you're interested in finding out more about what we do, be sure to check out focuscapital.ca. You can get more information on this episode and all of the other things that we've got going on. And with that, I hope you enjoy the show. All right, Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate you having me.
So I wanted to talk to you today about a few different things. You know, there's obviously some different things going on in the real estate market. Some things, from the Bank of Canada, and we're all talking about interest rates these days and immigration and things like that. And, but I thought it'd be interesting just to kind of set the stage a little bit. And before we dive into real estate and maybe some statistics and plans for the future, just to get a little bit of a backstory from you about how you started Rockstar Real Estate and some of the influences maybe you had growing up. I'm always curious to see what sort of the early influences were and sort of the triggers were in someone's development, and what sort of pushed them into, taking a more independent path, maybe an entrepreneurial journey, or getting into real estate investing and things like that. So I'd love it if you could share a little bit about, some of those early influences and maybe what sort of triggered you to start Rockstar Real Estate and move into that space.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been asked about the influences before, so it's interesting. I think one of the influences was really the government job that I had. I left school when I finished school. I was kind of being recruited out there by Procter and Gamble, which seemed like a pretty, it's a big company. It was like a cool place to go work, right? This Procter and Gamble, you get this type of job out there, but it was into the city and the traffic getting in and out. I was living at the west side of Mississauga at the time, east side of Mississauga at the time. And, wasn't too interested in that. So I went, and one of my co-op placements was with the region of Peel up in Brampton. So I went there, and, I was in the IT department there, and I liked it. And there were some good people there, but I got so frustrated because I couldn't do anything. Like the process to get anything done was 5 signatures, 3 meetings, and like 2 weeks. I left there pissed off every day. I remember talking to my girlfriend at the time, who was my wife now, and I'd be like, I'm wasting my life away at this place. Like, I'm just pissed. Like, I can't do anything. So I wanted to be rewarded for the effort that I put into something. That was where what I wanted. And it reminded me of working on the construction site with my father. My father had a drywall business. And there was 2 types of people. I was getting paid hourly. I was a laborer. I was scraping floors. Like after the tapers were done, I get the metal scraper and scrape the floors and sweep it all. I was doing insulation and wearing a mask in the heat at that time. That's before masks were like a cool thing now that some people still like them. Right. That's before that time when I was like, I don't want this stupid mask on. And but then there's these other guys working, and they were doing the framing and they were doing the drywall, and they left all the drywall pieces around. I'm like, why am I picking up this guy's garbage? And they're like, well, that guy gets paid on piecework. So the more work he does, he gets paid more. And I'm like, that seems interesting to me. So when I was at this, region of Peel job, I was very handcuffed, and it was good, but I was like, I wanted to be rewarded for the effort I put in. And that's one of the things that led me to looking into real estate investing, because I was like, I feel like if I can make some progress here or do some things, I get rewarded for it in a different way. So I think that was kind of like, the big thought that I had at that time. Remember, I was like 21 years old at that time. I didn't have very many deep thoughts, so that was deep to me, figuring that out. And then the way we started Rockstar was basically over time as we started investing. So that was my brother and I. So we each started investing ourselves independently. And then we kind of joined forces and started doing some investing ourselves. And we just looked around and we said, holy crap, like we learned all this real estate stuff. We've read books, we've gone to courses, all this type of thing. There's no one actually on the streets helping people. Like, it's very easy to talk about real estate from like on a podcast or, in front of a board or in a book, but to go actually do it on the streets like you're doing as well with your investing and stuff, It's a lot different when you're actually doing the damn thing versus talking about it. And there was no one on the streets helping people. So he said, why don't we be the people that links the information from the books, courses, reports, internet, whatever people are reading, and helps them, handholds them implementing on the streets. There's this gap in the market that no one seems to have filled there. And that was it, really. We're just like, we're investors. We think we can help other people. And then we kind of went from there.
Wow. Yeah. And that's, I think a lot of people go through that sort of experience when they see that there are other ways other than just trading your time for money, right? And so if you have an experience where maybe you do a real estate deal, or maybe you, I don't know, invest in something, invest in stocks, or do some research, or start a little side business, and you realize that you can actually have a lot of leverage just by doing the right things and preparing yourself, and and that's really powerful. So that's really cool that you kind of realized that early on, or you had that experience, which kind of changed your sort of path that you were taking.
Yeah, the construction site was insightful. Let me tell you, I left the construction site one day. I couldn't take it anymore. I was like, Tom, my brother, I know you know, but for anyone else listening, and I'm like, Tom, I can't take this anymore. Like, I'm leaving. And he was like, what do you mean you're leaving? Like, Daddy's going to be here soon. And if you're not here, like, it's going to be a problem. I'm like, I know, I can't take it. I'm going to go home and find a job before he gets home. So he'll be less mad at me for taking off. So I went home and I started applying at like a moving company. I'm like, movers. I'm like, I'm a young guy. I can pick up stuff. I'm like, I can get a job as a mover, no problem. So by the time he get back, I was trying to take a little bit of the froth off the anger. My dad's like an old school Eastern European guy, so it didn't really work too well. But anyways, there's a life lesson there that was worthwhile, and I should share that with him. That me walking off the job that day was actually what got me to this position today. See if he agrees.
Well, I love the fact that you said you had to have a job or some kind of a plan by the time you got home, right? It was okay, the option is not to do nothing. It's actually to do something different, but I better figure it out quick. Right?
Yeah, I got like 5 hours. You know what I mean? I got to figure this out.
Plenty of time, yeah. So that's cool. So I guess at that point you sort of decided like, okay, listen, I need to take a different path. You were just sort of fed up. And talk a bit about that process of actually getting, Rockstar Real Estate off the ground. Like, was it sort of envisioned like, okay, we're going to maybe start this as a side thing and we'll see where it goes? Or were you guys, you and Tom, your brother, sort of like fully committed day one? And maybe talk a little bit about that and just sort of how that rolled out.
Yeah, I think it was at a period in time where both of us were a little bit frustrated. I shouldn't say a little bit. We were both frustrated or fed up with what we were doing. Tom was a software sales manager at a company that was, is now a pretty big company. I believe they're Fortune 500. I don't know. But they were about to go public. So it was during a busy time there. And it was just there were some things going on there internally that he wasn't maybe a huge fan of. So he was getting pretty frustrated that way. I was running a company that my friend of mine started. And it was very reactive. It was hard in that type of role to be proactive with what I was doing. And that was frustrating to me because it was always like something, external factors happened and then we had to scramble. And I didn't like that aspect of that company. So there was frustration both ways. So when this idea kind of came up, we thought it made sense. Now, having said that, without the timing had to line up, without certain kind of life circumstances happening, we probably would have never got it off the ground. But there was no real grand vision. It was like, we just need to start. And we just literally started. We had some marketing material. We started running some ads. And then we sent out the marketing material to the people that responded to the ads. This was like, it seems crazy to say this now because, it wasn't that long ago, but it was at a time when the internet, yes, it existed, but it wasn't like everything was done online. Right. So we were running newspaper ads, and then we were getting people to call a 1-800 number, listen to our recorded message. They would leave their information. Then we would mail them stuff. We still mail stuff out. We like that as a strategy for a marketing strategy, but it's like that was like the only option. Like for us to put up we didn't have the website up for until a year later, but we just needed to start with something. And then we started meeting with some investors one-on-one. And we're like, yeah, here's what we're doing. Here's what we've done. Here's kind of some investing things that we've done. Here's kind of how it worked out. Here's our beliefs behind it and why we think it makes a difference. And that's, I think, maybe something that really at that time might have separated us apart, that we didn't understand, that it separated us apart at that time. And then we just started working with people. We started holding their hands, saying, okay, like the commitment was, it wasn't like, hey, I'm going to help you go buy a property. It was like, look, we're going to go find an investment and I'm going to be here to support you through this investment for the lifetime of the property. And I think that's what separated us apart, because no one else was willing to do that. In the real estate world, people were like, hey, I mean, everyone told us we were crazy to work with investors, first of all. They're like, that's a waste of time. They want to put 100 offers in. Lowball offers doesn't make sense. You have to list to last in the real estate world. And we're like, that's so stupid. Screw all that stuff. We don't know. I don't even like real estate. I like the investing side of it. I wouldn't be a terrible person in real estate, because if someone complains about the color of the carpet or the color of the wall, I'd be like, I don't know, paint it. Like, what's it matter? Why are we even talking about this? Right. You know, I'd be like the worst person. Yeah. But we just understood the numbers and we just kind of made it work with people. And these were people that, wanted to kind of start owning some assets in their lives. So literally it was just a trickle. It was just a slow trickle. And then it started, as we got traction, we're like, holy crap, maybe there's something to this. And then eventually I went into the business full-time first. Tom had a higher salary, so we wanted his T4 to allow us to keep buying properties. And then, that T4 with the banks and stuff, the banks love their T4, right? Yeah. So he was funding the business while I was working in the business. Then eventually we got to a point, as we kind of, that trickle kind of grew to like a slow flow and then a little bit of a stream. And we're like, we have enough business that you need to leave your job. So he left his job too, and our accountant at the time looked at him. I was there with him, and he's like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, have you talked to your wife? Because he had a very good income. He's like, you're going to leave this to do this? So like, the accountant kind of thought he was crazy, but it's worked out. But there was some challenges. Tom had a young baby at home. I didn't have kids yet, but I was newly married, trying to figure out how to afford a house and stuff like that. So, But yeah, it was just a little trickle effect of us just trying to help a few investors that slowly kind of built into a little bit more and kind of grew from there.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think, once you connect with people who understand and kind of vibe with you on that same level, like, okay, I like what these guys are doing. And, maybe it wasn't apparent at that point, but, you guys were starting to build a brand and starting to build a culture at that point, even though it might have been very, very raw. But I think once people can kind of see, oh yeah, these guys are, I can connect with them. I can understand what they're doing, because they're just trying maybe to get out of, we talk about the matrix at some of your events, get out of that matrix a little bit and start doing things for themselves. So I think that really resonates with a lot of people. So I guess my next question would be about, you guys talk a lot about, leverage and the power of owning assets, and really just doing things to, to sort of get back your time. And one of the things that I think, resonated when you and I first met is like you just said, Nick, it's not so much about the real estate, but it's about creating that lifestyle that you want, right? It's about, using these different vehicles, these different assets, investments, whatever you want to call them, to really build the life that you want, right? And to get back that time. And if you want to travel, to do that. If you want to teach, if you want to do that, you want to focus on your hobbies or your family or whatever. So can you talk a bit about that sort of culture? Because I know you've got a good brand now, right? It's I don't know, 20 plus years maybe in the making to kind of get to this point. But maybe talk about those early days and did you kind of have that vision for this kind of your life, your terms culture, or how did that sort of build up from there?
So I appreciate you saying that. I mean, we don't look at ourselves as like that we have this brand in any way, shape, or form, but we just kind of try to do stuff. But other people have mentioned that. So I guess over time we've been we've been around long enough. We've survived enough market cycles that people that they're like, oh, okay, these guys are still around. Maybe they're still there, right? Yeah. Look, when we started this, we were called Income for Life for a period of time, and then we went out on our own to start our own brokerage, because the brokerage didn't like what we were doing, and we're like, look, we're just going to start our own thing. When we were doing that, we tossed around different ideas. So we both made a list of 20 names or whatever. We just kind of took some time. We both made individual lists and we compared the names, and we went through them. And I'm pretty sure it was on Tom's list. I don't want to give him credit, but I was pretty sure it was on Tom's list. And it was one of the names was Rockstar Real Estate. I was like, oh man, I like that. But then we laughed. We're like, could you imagine we actually called the company Rockstar? Like, these are in the days when there weren't a bunch of these real estate companies around, because it was just like, it was, Remax, Royal LePage, Century, but we didn't do, we had no ambition to do what they were doing. And we didn't view ourselves in the same light at all. Like that was never the goal, is to, so it's a very different thing. So we're like, well, we don't care about that. And then one day Tom called me and I was driving along the QW and I remember he's like, Nick, I got it. He goes, you don't invest in real estate to be a landlord. You want to live like the life that you want. He goes, that's your rock star life. So it doesn't matter if it's partying in Vegas or if it's at the cottage in the hammock reading a book, whatever it is, that's your life on your terms. And that's Rockstar Real Estate. And I was like, holy shit, that's actually pretty smart. Again, don't like to give him credit, but got to give him credit for that one. It was
younger
good.
brother giving the older brother credit.
Yeah. I'm stronger than him officially, so just that not many younger brothers can say that about the older brother. So I just want to, but no, it was good. Like and it really resonated, because that's what it was. Like real estate to us is a means to an end, and it's not about like if you want, the investors we work with, if they want one property and that's going to impact their life, perfect. That's it. Don't get a second one. Just do everything. But if they want 5 properties because that's going to suit their lifestyle and give them maybe that more flexibility or freedom or whatever it is, then do that. But in the real estate world, like the residential side that we play in, so much of this, some different real estate groups, like it always gets caught up in, how many doors do you have? I got 50 doors. I got 120 doors. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, it's so incestuous. Like I got to be honest. I don't like using the word. I won't use hate. I dislike that very much. I think it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So we always looked at real estate. It's a means to an end. Can it serve a purpose in your life? And for some people it does. And some people it serves an enormous purpose and allow them to quit their job and do all sorts of stuff. Some people are like, no, I don't want that. It just serves a small purpose. And some people it's not a fit at all. And each one of those decisions is right for each person. But that's where the whole Rockstar thing came from. And we really believed that, it's why we left our jobs, is we wanted more control over our time, our finances, and that type of thing. And we realized that was ultimately the goal that we were helping people towards. That was it. It wasn't about the real estate properties necessarily. We just looked at that as a vehicle to get to where we wanted, or to help other people get where they wanted as well.
Yeah. No, and as I said, I think that's what deep down resonates with a lot of people. And that's why I think, I still go to your events and I still see people there that have been members for some of these people 10 plus years, right? And they still stick with you. And maybe they even haven't bought a property in a while, but they like the brand. They like the other people that you attract to your events and things like that. So I think there's something there that really resonates with people. And again, at the end of the day, it's not really about the real estate. It's about that lifestyle. So that's really cool. And I guess from an early stage, if you know that and you're starting to build around it, then you kind of go from there. And some of the cool things that you guys do that I see at your events is, you have health and wellness speakers. You talk about personal development. You obviously talk about real estate and stats and things like that. But you're really sort of, catering to some of those other things. So that's really cool.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you saying that. And it's just, it's partly out of, I guess there's a couple of things, partly out of boredom, because there's only so much, well, I mean, the reality is there's only so much real estate stuff you can talk about, right? Like nothing's really changed. It's not rocket science. There's not these monstrous new developments. I know in every hot real estate market, there's some people that come out of the woodworks and they're like, oh, I got the next best strategy of how to become a millionaire in real estate in 24 hours, with none of your own money or effort or whatever the promise is, right? But the reality is nothing's changed in the real estate game for a long time. Outside of some rules around taxes or financing, it's the same. You get an asset and you figure out a way for that asset to generate income for you, or increase the value of that asset, or pay down that asset over time and then maybe leverage that again. Like, I mean, it's like simple stuff. Like I know you get this, right? So we can,
and it's part of the beauty of it too.
Yeah. Like it's try, tested, and true. So So we're like, but you can only go through that so much. So in our world, if we have more experienced investors like yourself, and then some newer people, we so from a business standpoint, we have to try to cater to both. Right, so that's why we have to try to interject new things as well, and then we've gone down different rabbit holes in our lives for different things that we feel have been beneficial to us or served us, and sometimes it's other people have introduced things to us, and we feel they can help other people. So we just think so a lot of it's driven by demand from people to come to those things, but it's just to give. Yeah, just to, I guess, a different perspective and just make it about more. I guess our whole belief is that it really is about more.
Yeah. No, for sure. Okay, so maybe let's shift gears a little bit and talk about kind of the current state of affairs right now. So, as we're recording this, it's February 2024. We're, almost 2 years into this, I guess, this latest cycle of higher interest rates and, kind of semi-recessionary environment that we're in, and, Bank of Canada trying to tamp down inflation and things like that. And it's really done a number on, various segments of the real estate market. And so I'd like to get your thoughts on sort of where you see things headed right now as we're kind of venturing into 2024. How has that maybe affected your guys' business? I mean, obviously, when things were booming, 3-4 years ago, prices were going up so much. It's, I think it was probably a much, I don't want to say easier sell for you guys, but obviously there was probably a lot more people just attracted to investing in real estate and coming and joining your courses and your events and things like that. So maybe just give a little bit of perspective on sort of, where we are right now and the current market and the current state of affairs.
Yeah, well, I mean, when rates were lower, just people that could qualify, never mind afford it.
Yeah.
Just to be able to qualify there, not even with any funds available. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like the investment group and the events and stuff, though, those really haven't changed too much. Are there some headwinds for new investors maybe coming in? We probably see that a little bit. I would say the groups kind of stayed about the same size. I mean, people have come and gone, but the numbers stayed about the same size, but it hasn't really gone down any. So we haven't seen the growth. But I think more people, if they're into that world, they're looking for information right now because they're trying to figure out what the heck's going on. Because in a market like we've been through, as things are shifting, the information can be an advantage to you, whereas before it was like, I don't know, buy any property in any area, and, with anything, you're going to make in 6 months, sell it, and pocket 50 to 150 grand. Like it's,
Right.
So when that finally disappeared, which by the way is like terrible in my opinion for the real estate market, for the economy. Like there's just all sorts of things wrong with that. It's like even as someone that owns properties and someone that works with investors, it's not sustainable. It's not good. It's just bad all around. So on that side of things, there's still a lot of people just kind of looking to have an understanding and looking for help from maybe people that are investing or doing different things and trying to associate with that, because there's really been, like all of us, there's value to that, whether it's exactly like I don't play in your market, right? So I'm more the residential side.
Sure.
But seeing what you're seeing, and I always ask you questions, well, hey, what are you seeing? What are your rates? What kind of businesses are doing it? Understanding that helps me as a real estate investor because it gives me insight into another perspective, and I can understand the economy. Just like understanding the real estate side, the residential side of things for you is just like, okay, that's interesting. Like I should keep that in mind. I need to know what's going on there when I'm looking at industrial as well, because they're kind of linked, right? So right. There's all those kind of benefits. I think the biggest challenges we're seeing now is just, like everyone knows, is just affordability in general is just a real challenge for people, whether it's down payments or making the numbers work on an investment with rates where they are. A lot of investors over the last couple of years, as rates have increased, some investors we've seen reshuffle their portfolios. So if they have, a dozen properties or whatever the number may be, they've taken one or two that they don't like the numbers on anymore because interest rates have gone up, and they've kind of cashed out of some of those. Some of those people, to be fair, they had some properties for a period of time and they've refinanced it once or twice. And then now they're like, well, that one's in a big negative cash flow situation. I'm like, yeah, but you kind of also, you've taken $500,000 of profit out. So you got to offset that somehow, right? But so we have seen people kind of reshuffle things a little bit. Other people, what they've done is they've changed strategies or added additional income streams. And that's been the beauty of some of being able to have, more of the leaning more towards single family stuff, which we've always liked more in the residential world versus something like a condo. There's nothing wrong with the condo if that's your thing for investing, but it just gives you more options. Or the condo, you're kind of limited. So we've had people turn it into, maybe tenants left, they turned it into a rent to own to try to get like a higher monthly income. But the more common strategies are starting to divide it into more units. So whether it's dividing it into like a 2 or 3 units where they can then rent out and change the income numbers. If you're looking at some places outside the city, the whole house might rent for $2,400 maybe, like a 3-bedroom bungalow. But if they break it up into 2 units, you can probably get almost that for it might be $2,500. You get like 21, 22 for the upstairs, and the basement you're getting like 18 or so. So you're over $4,000. So that changes the numbers that way. Some people then will take that a step further and rent to students. And I mean, rent properly to students. Give them each a room. Not put like 5 mattresses on the ground and rent out mattresses and make them all sleep in one room altogether. Like none of that.
Proper suites.
Yeah. So we've seen people just kind of change strategy to kind of increase income a little bit. So, it's almost like people have to be back to being investors versus before where it was just like, buy anything. We're kind of back to like, hey, to invest, you kind of got to look at it. You got to find not every property is going to work. You got to find the right one. You got to run the numbers, and you got to kind of make things work, right?
Yeah, I'm just thinking it's probably more reminiscent of when you guys first started, because that was probably early 2000s you got going, mid 2000s?
Mid 2000s. Was it 2006, 2004? I forget. I think 2006. Yeah.
So you didn't, I guess the point I'm trying to make is you didn't have the wild, appreciation every year. So you had to buy right. You had to really focus on location. You had to focus on demographics and transportation, infrastructure, all these types of things that would make a location good and a certain property kind of do well in cash flow and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I think, it's kind of back to those old days, maybe, if I can call it that.
100%. In some ways, in a lot of ways that way. And at that time, we were telling people to fill a property like, hey, like it's we were telling people 6 to 8 weeks. It would normally take maybe 4 to 6, really, if they kind of followed, actually did stuff. But then we got to this point where not only property sales, like properties were selling in a day, but rentals still. Now the rental market's cooled off a little bit, but it's had like 2 to 3 years of just like being completely overheated because of the demand we've seen. So we see investors now where their property doesn't rent in 1 week, and they're like, well, it's been a week. It's not rented yet. I'm like, yeah, that's you haven't been exposed to normal market conditions. Like it should take longer than that. Same with the rent increases that we've had. Like those are nice for all the investors, but completely not sustainable. We can't have rent increases of 15% every year. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, and it's funny. I actually sold a property about 1.5 years ago, and I remember the realtor commenting, like, "Oh wow, we've got to have an open house, and we got to have a lot of showings here." And I thought, yeah, that's kind of what you have to do when you sell a house in normal times. I think during the the craziness of the market in 2020, 2021, it was just sort of like listed on Monday, and Friday night you had your offer night, and away you go, right? But
yeah,
that's not a normal market.
No, not at all. So, and
yeah.
I don't know. I think we're messing up the market dynamics so much. I don't think we're going to get back to that normal market in a lot of segments of the market, specifically the single family stuff. Like we are so, in my opinion, we're so underbuilt on single family homes, and we're not building anymore. There's none in the pipeline. The building permit numbers have come way down. The ones under construction have come way down. Like this is a long-term trend that they've come down. So we're growing our population and we're building housing units. So we're not building single family. So, when rates, when or if rates go down, when the demand's still there for those, I don't know when I just don't know when we're going to see that type of normal market again. This isn't coming from a guy that's like, it's real estate. It only goes out. Like, I don't care about all that stuff. I just
Sure.
think, I think what we've done is a really crappy job at structuring things for our population growth. And there's just been no communication. And I think it's going to create some problems in segments of the real estate market.
Yeah, maybe talk a little bit about that, Nick, because obviously, we're seeing the headlines here in Canada, immigration, I think peaked at about 1 million people in 2023, and a big chunk of that were the non-permanent residents. We had international students coming in, and various sort of, a breakdown of that. But these are big numbers, and I think even the most basic understanding of economics and supply and demand would lead you to believe, like, okay, well, we brought in 1 million people last year and even more the year before that, and where's everyone going to live, right? And so how is the economy and how is the market here responding to that? And unfortunately, it's because of the interest rate environment and inflation and different things, a lot of developers aren't building as much as they could right now. So maybe touch upon that and just what you guys are seeing, and how does that pose challenges to people who are in the market investing and also just managing properties.
Yeah, I mean, look, the government screwed things up. They massively screwed things up. Like like we got to be honest and direct about it. The federal government makes targets for immigration, and then the provincial governments will plan around those types of targets. So if they've made these targets, saying, okay, we're going to bring in this number, but then they exceed them by multiples, the provinces can't plan accordingly. I'm not saying they're not at fault either, but it just makes no sense. So we have all this influx of people, no infrastructure. We have no additional roads being built because of them. We have no additional communities being built. We have no hospitals being built, no schools. Like, if you want to make a country and people that are living in that country anti-immigration, they've done the best job possible to do that, because they've done this in such a piss poor way. And I'm a pro-immigration. Look, my parents were both immigrants into Canada. Okay. Yep. Like, I'm pro-immigration. We had a great immigration system. I'm happy to bring in immigrants to Canada. This isn't an anti-immigration thing at all. But I mean, the way they've done it is just like, it's stupid beyond belief. So you're seeing real challenges in it. And it's when incomes can't keep up, you get to this point where things kind of get ridiculous, and people are in bad situations because of it. And that's kind of what we're seeing, unfortunately. So, as someone that owns assets and, owns residential properties, and there's strong demand for them because of population growth and there's not enough supply, it serves me. All these things serve me, but it doesn't mean I like it. Like, I think it's stupid. Mm-hmm. So, I just, there's so many different ways to go there, but basically, what we're going to see moving forward is the headlines are going to be like, well, immigration's down, okay, because they're making some announcements for non-permanent residents and students, but the immigration numbers are down from these ridiculous numbers. They're still up. When the immigration rules changed in 2014 and those numbers started picking up in 2015, they're still up very strongly from that. So even if we shave off 40% or 50% off this million mark that we hit, we're still probably a couple 100,000 over of where the target was. 100,000 of the more recent targets are the 400,000, but we're still 100,000 over is 25% over. 100,000 over the average house in Canada's households roughly two and a half people. We're still tens of thousands of units short every year of housing units, not to mention the backlog that we're trying to build. So there's got to be something kind of fixed here. And then the ones we're building are all these small, tiny condos and things like that. So there's got to be a real shift in what's happening. And you're seeing more people look into it, and the developers are talking to the government, and they're trying to make headway. So much red tape and stuff. It's almost impossible. So Canada's definitely gone through this boom now. I think it goes through a little bit of a lull, because people are going to be like, I'm not going there. It's all screwed up. And it slows down the numbers, but it's going to slow down the numbers to a point that doesn't help us catch up. We could probably stop immigration for 10 years and finally start to fix some of these problems and then start it again. But I don't think it'll never get to that point.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because when we look at the statistics, the metric that they use, or that you see in the headlines, are housing units, right? Which, as you said, could mean an apartment, could mean a townhouse, could mean anything. But I think there still is that sentiment and that sort of, dream of home ownership for a lot of people, immigrants and established Canadians alike, that have this dream of owning a single family home at some point, right? And so I think that's the challenge is, and maybe that's just sort of, the reality of the situation for a lot of people, for future generations here in Canada. It's going to become more like Europe, where, it's just going to become more urbanized, more dense, and, your single family home that you would typically aspire to here may look like a 2 or 3 bedroom condo or a stacked townhouse or something like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
If they even start building those units, because that's the other thing
Yeah.
that we're missing. No one's building those units. So now they've changed some rules in Toronto, and we work with a couple architects down there that are buying, they'll buy 2 lots, 2 very narrow lots, and they'll put like a 6-plex on it. And that's finally some of the units we needed. And they'll put some, some more reasonable, maybe 2 bedrooms or a little bit more space in these types of properties, which is helpful. But it's not even owning the single family home at this point. It's like, they're just not, like, you can't even rent and live in one because they're just not available, so it's right. I don't know. I mean, we'll see what the future holds, but there's definitely some things are out of whack. And if we bring it back to investing, it's it's why we the way our system is structured with these price increases, because everyone talks about supply and demand, and that's one thing 100%, but the way our financial system is structured is it's the way we create money and grow our monetary base has a direct impact on prices. So everyone just looks at the prices of things, but they don't realize what's happening behind the scenes is that we're just growing the amount of money in circulation, the amount of Canadian dollars. So there's very few things that will keep up with that debasement of the currency. And it's why a lot of people have rushed to real estate, because it's one thing that was able to keep up. But if you look at the historic numbers, even from about the year 2000, I think we have about an 8.2% growth in the Canadian currency from that period of time. Whereas we have in the Toronto real estate, we have about a 7.8% growth in property prices on average every year. So the property prices, they've gone up only in dollar terms, but they actually haven't gone up as in relation to the amount of currency in play. And I know I'm changing topics, and I didn't mean to, but I think it's like so many people are focused just on this supply and demand and the population growth, and it's a real issue. But what's added fuel to that fire, that's almost like we have supply and demand problems, and that's like the kindling in the fire. And then the fuel to the fire of rent prices and property prices was the government's, the deficit spending that they decided to go on and print all this money that kind of really screwed up everything. And it screwed up groceries and all these other things. But anyone with savings wants to go buy a good asset that will hold its value and protect the purchasing power of those savings. And that's why people jumped into real estate. So we got this big boost because of that. And if those policies don't change, I don't know if that changes. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. I don't see how it does without a policy change, because if you keep the money in your bank account, you lose purchasing power on it every single year that goes by.
Yeah. No, and I've heard you say that many, many times at different events and different, talks that you guys have given. It's really, we as individual investors, excuse me, can't go and change the system. So really the only way to kind of get ahead of it and try to leverage and at least keep up with it is to own assets, right? And if you own these assets, which are, part of this inflationary environment that we're in, at least we're able to track along with it, right? Whereas, like you said, if you just throw your money in a bank account, it's not working for you.
Yeah. Do you? I've looked at different reports, and we've seen it. I should fact check all this, but I believe, because we've looked at stock market prices before and after, adjusted for inflation over the last 20 years and things like that. And from my understanding, the only 3 assets that have kept up with the monetary debasement is technology stocks, Bitcoin, and leveraged real estate. Right. And that's the benefit of real estate, is that you get to use that leverage and that debasement to your advantage, because you don't have to pay cash for something. You can, right. You can use the leverage, and you can pay it back with future dollars that are cheaper. Right. So that's the only real 3 assets that have really made sense. If you look at the inflation adjusted price of any other of the assets from, it's either 20 years or back to the year 2000. And it's almost like nothing else has kept up. Everything has lost more value because of the money printing. And I'm
Yeah.
talking about Canada
Yeah.
and the U.S. Those two economies specifically, but it's really been global, right?
Yeah. No, and it's to the extreme in the U.S. for sure. So, yeah.
We're actually, we print more money. I wish I had these charts ready. I'd show them. We print more money than the U.S. We've actually outstripped the U.S. in printing money. It's one of the things that we can say we're better at the U.S. than is debasing our currency.
You mean like relatively speaking, like per capita?
Relatively speaking, as a percentage, not per capita, but as a percentage of the money supply in base. Yeah, not as the total money supply, but as a percentage of the money that we print every year, we're doing it at a faster pace.
Yeah. And I think so that would actually make sense to me. But the U.S. gets the headlines because they're just such a massive economy and they're in the trillions and trillions of dollars. But wow, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay, so maybe shifting gears into kind of, the future and where you sort of see Rockstar going, and maybe talking a little bit about strategies for investors as they kind of plan out the next year and maybe the next few years of their sort of investment cycles. I'd love to get your thoughts just on, what are investors doing now and maybe just planning to do this year to be a bit more sophisticated. And I'm talking obviously in the residential market where you guys focus in. You mentioned sort of, single family homes and adding more units, things like that. What sorts of things are investors doing and what are you sort of seeing and planning for the future with how you're kind of helping these investors out?
Yeah, I think the number one thing that people are looking at now with their properties is what options does it bring? So I think investors really like looking at properties that give you, you're not tied to one strategy or you're really tied to something. And I don't mean to pick on condos, but I'll use condos as an example again. If it's a 30-story building and you have unit 1201 and it's the same as 1301, 1401, 1501, right? There's not much you can do with that property. You can't add another unit. You can't add a second entrance. You can rent it out maybe by each, if there's a 2-bedroom, you can each rent out each room and see if that offsets something a little bit, but you're tied to the condo corp, right? Whereas the investors that are buying a property and, maybe it's a townhome or detached, I always think of these I grew up in Mississauga, and one of the things I always looked at, there was these semi-detached, raised like a 2-story semi-detached home. So you pull the driveway, would you pull in on the lowest level, and there's a second story. You'd walk up some stairs to the second story. And I always looked at those things. I'm like, man, I love that. You can live upstairs, rent out the basement. Like it just seems like such a good system. Or you rent out the 2 units. And now I think of the older like 3-bedroom bungalows with the side entrance and the driveway at the side. Side entrance is a separate entrance for another unit. Maybe you're buying a property and you want that, and it gives you the option to kind of split it up and then do what you want with it, or to put it in a garden suite, or to do laneway housing, or to potentially, if it's a big lot, potentially knock it down and do something with it. So it's just nice to have those future options. Even if you never do anything with them, I think that's what investors are looking at. They're like, okay, so I'm getting this. Here's the way this thing works now. Like it makes sense now. It's not so bad. But if I do want to do something with this in the future, there is some upside. It's work. It's capital cost to do this stuff, but there is some upside to that if I want to take advantage of it. So I think that's where more people are going. We're seeing definitely a trend towards density. We're seeing a few different people that we work with going into specifically the Toronto area, but with some changes there. They're just the need for density there. And like I was mentioning before, taking a couple lots or scooping up a few lots and building small buildings that way, multiplex buildings that they can get good financing for. CMHC right now has good financing on those types of residential options. Depending on there's a number of factors, but depending on some of the factors, it's up to, 95% loan to value. And the banks always like it when it's insured, so it's lower rates, so there's options there for sure. So a lot of people are doing that. And I think that type of thing's going to be the future. I think providing good housing units, good, safe, livable housing units to people is going to be an opportunity for investors moving forward. And our belief is that, in the way our system is structured, there's value to owning good assets. And we want to own assets, and assets to us give us financial flexibility. They're like the foundation that we can build upon. So if we're able to scoop up good assets, I'm talking we as myself or other investors, that's kind of what we're looking at doing. Because if with this much, like you mentioned, the U.S., their economy really runs the world, and their currency really runs the world. It's the American dollar. So as the currencies continue to get debased, like the U.S. has all this debt in the system, Canada has all this debt in the system. How are they going to pay that off? Likely by printing more money through inflation. And if that's the case, then we would rather own assets in our lives, something that will protect the purchasing power of our savings, versus just leaving some money in the bank and seeing that be diminished. So I think that's where we're focused over time. And that's really, to answer your other part of the question about Rockstar, that's really, I think, where we see Rockstar heading as well, is maybe expanding outside of just real estate and being like, hey, there's other opportunities for us for assets as well. And then we're seeing demand from, this is within real estate, but even outside of Canada, whereas, we started playing in the US a little bit with some relationships that we have down there, because we're seeing more Canadians come and say, hey, like, look, I'm not sure if I like the way things are headed here as much as I did. I'm not saying I'm taking off from Canada, but I do want to leave some options open. So, do I take some money, like maybe I buy some properties in the US, and we have a good friend in Florida that has a whole structure built around this, and he's doing build to rent and works with institutional investors, but we'll work with the investors we work with as well. And, so some people are taking some funds and putting them in the US as just like an opportunity to, like, in the future, maybe, I have a couple of investment properties down there, and then they will take those funds and do something else down there with that. So we've kind of expanded based on where we're seeing, I guess, developments in the country go, where we're seeing maturing investors want to go, and where kind of our own kind of path has taken us as well. So there's a couple different things going on that way.
Yeah, no, and I think that's good because, as you said, part of what I'm seeing in the market is like, I think we're reaching a point here in Canada where affordability is becoming a challenge for a lot of people. The population's growing. We're maturing as a society. We're definitely getting older in terms of demographics and things like that. So I think it's, the onus is on us as investors to have a look at, what the market we're playing in. And if it doesn't work anymore, or it makes sense to diversify outside of Canada into the US, into other parts of the world even, then we need to be able to look at that. And I think technology is definitely helping, and, having different groups such as yourselves that can maybe make some introductions or have a program where, like you said, you partner with somebody in the US. I think that's great. And I think, us as investors really need to take advantage of that, because there are options out there, right? Like, I mean, it's something that definitely we should be looking at, and it's just part of being a sort of a comprehensive investor, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah. There's always options. I think it's just, you talked about the difference in markets recently, like earlier. It's almost like we've gotten lazy as investors, because it was just like, buy something, price goes up, But yeah, are the options hard to find now? Yeah, 100%. Especially as more money was in the system chasing all those investments. But I mean, 5 years ago, the options were harder to find than 10 years ago. So I don't know that in 5 years from now it's going to be any easier. Like we could look at today and be like, hey, the numbers are tighter to make work today, but they might be better today than they are in 5 years. We don't know, because that's proven true really since we've been in business, for almost 20 years. It's consistently gotten a little bit harder to make things work. I'm not talking about from price appreciation. I'm talking about from a cash flow, a positive cash flow investment opportunity. It's kind of gotten a little bit consistently harder. So yeah, I just look at these like, if it's, something that I'm interested in now, I should look now, because you can always wait. And, I don't know. You just look back and you're just like, oh, I should have done this a long time ago. I used to drive I went to Sheridan College. I used to drive along on a bus along Dundas down Trafalgar. I grew up with the east side of Mississauga, and I would look at these homes that they were building at Trafalgar and Dundas. There were townhomes. They were behind, if anyone's familiar with the area, they're behind like the Canadian Tire that's there now. And I remember thinking when they were building those, who the heck would want to live all the way out here? Because in my small world at the time, Oakville was like the edge of the earth, right? And the properties were selling like in the 100s. And it's just like, so everyone can look back and say, oh, I should have done that. I look back and be like, I should have just bought one of those. Even when I was in college, I could have figured out a way to figure out how to buy one, right? I don't know. I definitely think there's opportunities if you want to. I mean, if you're someone that doesn't want to look for opportunities right now, then don't look. It's not for you. But I definitely think there's opportunities, and I just don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to get any easier, and I wouldn't bank on it getting easier. So you got to make something work now.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I wanted to ask you about was just, and we've talked about this on previous discussions and podcasts, is, what we're doing for the next generation and things like that. And I'm wondering if, and I've seen some of the members even at Rockstar developing, financial literacy programs for kids and things like that. Is that something you guys are looking at doing maybe, or making, I don't know, Rockstar and going back to this brand thing, more about this, I don't know, just not so much just focus on the individual, but more of a family and more of a lifestyle and a bit more holistically. And have you guys talked about that at all?
We've been asked for that for a while, to do something for kids. And I think it's just, we don't know, exactly where that is. Like we haven't put the time on that. What we've seen happen, and, maybe we could try to foster this a bit more by putting some time on that. But what's really cool is when the kids get a certain age and the parents feel like they're going to be comfortable with it, is that they bring them to the events. I've heard many people say, "Hey, here's my kid. I make them listen to all the podcasts and things like that." I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." I apologize to the kid. I'm like, "I'm sorry that you're listening to that." But so I think that's kind of just, naturally, organically that happens. Part of the reason one barrier is always like, well, we don't want to be involved in parenting other people's kids because maybe the parents don't agree with some of the lessons. You know what I mean? Like maybe one of my beliefs, I'm going to say that. They're going to be like, hey, that guy's wrong. Don't do that. So it's just something that we're not there. But if the parents seem to think some of the stuff that we do makes sense and they want them involved, we've always been more than open for them to come together and for us to assist in any ways and all sorts of stuff. We've had meetings with members who have started business, their kids have started businesses and their kids have wanted to talk to us about, hey, some stuff that if we can help them with that. So yeah, there's no formal program, but I think it's really important and I think it's just part of the community. But it has been cool to see Mark and Anthony, which is, I think what you're mentioning is they've put together this financial literacy course for kids, and they met in the community. They're offering it to people's kids in the community. They're getting good feedback from it. And I'm like, wow, that's like a really, really cool byproduct. We're not doing any of it, but if somehow there was a little bit of a catalyst because of what we did, we're like, that's really cool,
Yeah, no, that's cool. Okay, so as we're wrapping up here, Nick, I just wanted to kind of give you the opportunity to kind of share, the best way for people to get in touch with you. Anything you want to plug in terms of what Rockstar is doing that's coming down the pipe, and maybe just how people can connect and learn more.
Yeah, no, the best place for everything is just rockstarinnercircle.com. We have everything there. With the podcast, if you want to check that out, it's the Your Life, Your Term show. That's everywhere as well. But if you go to rockstarinnercircle.com, videos, articles, reports, podcasts, whatever, everything we're doing is all there.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, thanks a lot for coming on the show, Nick. I really appreciate it. And I've really enjoyed the conversation with you today. So thanks a lot.
Cool, man. I appreciate it.
So hope you got some value out of this podcast episode. I invite you to like and subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, leave a comment. Let us know what you think. And for any other information about us, what we're doing, and the types of investments we're into, please visit focuscapital.ca, and on there you can find a ton of information, additional podcasts, and a lot of free resources. So that's it for this podcast episode. Bye for now.